right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the latest episode of Understanding Microsoft Agents. This is our 5th episode, and we'll put the link to the playlist with the previous episodes in the chat if you want to check those out. So I am super excited to be your co-host today. This is my first joining episode of Understanding Microsoft Agents. I'm Jolene Tam. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Employee Self-Service Agent, along with my colleague Swati Gulati here, Principal Product Manager representing our Rockstar team behind this Employee Self-Service Agent in M365 Copilot. Swati, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. So excited to be here. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. And before I forget, please feel free to ask questions at any point in the chat, and our wonderful colleague Debashish will answer them throughout through the chat. All right, so let's get started. All right, so today on Understanding Microsoft Agents, we are covering the new Employee Self-Service Agent, as I mentioned, which will begin rolling out to general availability this month. We're super excited about that. All right, so just a quick rundown of what to expect for today's episode. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the employee service delivery space as it's evolving in the era of AI. And then I'll give you a quick overview of the employee self-service agent in Copilot, as well as give you a bit of a demo of that end user experience, what employees experience with the agent. And then Swati will deep dive into that maker experience, that maker journey, as well as provide a demo as well. And I'll touch on a few key scenario examples in the HR and IT space. And then I'll kick it over to Swati to dig in a bit on our own employee self-service agent journey at Microsoft over the past year. And then I'll touch a bit on the licensing and how to access the agent. And Swati will wrap up with next steps and how you can get started. Hope that sounds great. All right, so I think most viewers are familiar with M365 Copilot, but let's just quickly level set for a minute. So Copilot is your everyday AI productivity companion. It's embedded in the apps you use every day and powered by your organizational data and the power of the Microsoft Graph. Agents extend Copilot beyond core apps to really be able to automate workflows and deliver those specialized experiences with custom agents, such as Employee Self-Service Agent built in Copilot Studio. Then the Copilot control system is there, providing that governance, the security, and telemetry for adopting Copilot and agents, with providing permission-aware grounding, life cycle management, as well as usage insights through the Copilot dashboard. And so why the need for employee self-service agent when we've got M365 Copilot? So Copilot is essentially an end user's productivity center of gravity. For tasks such as writing emails, creating forecasting reports, preparing presentations, all while leveraging graph connectors to provide the right context and relevance. This is all about personal productivity at work. But what's really driven the need for a specialized agentic experience for employee services delivery? When we zoom out and look across this ESD industry, there are just so many tools for employee HR and IT support. I think Swati is going to talk a little bit about our own Microsoft experience and just how many tools that we have, for HR and IT, for employees to get that support. So how can we streamline this so employees don't have such fragmented experiences navigating to and using multiple tools, apps, and agents? So employee services really is, you can think of it as like representative of your organization. It's part of your company's brand and culture. And you want this experience to be customized to match the look and feel of your brand. Have the right experiences, the agent experiences, such as starter prompts that reflect what's important to your company today. And And then unique to the employee services delivery space, policy information and systems of record are so critical for being able to provide trusted official knowledge, and to be able to provide that to customers or to employees, for them to be able to retrieve information and take actions. And finally, AI-powered employee experiences org-wide beyond personal productivity can really turn into immediate OpEx savings for a direct return on investment, through things such as like reduced support tickets. That's a pretty straightforward, example there. And to address these needs of employee service delivery, we're super excited, as I was saying, to introduce you to the employee self-service agent in Copilot. And so this agent is that centralized experience for employee support. And we're starting with HR and IT at general availability, and additional verticals will be coming soon. And you'll kind of get a taste for how we're doing it at Microsoft when Swati covers that. So to be clear, employee self-service is a custom agent in Copilot Studio. It is fully extensible to really tailor to your org needs, while also providing accelerator packs. I think of it as like starter kits to really be able to give makers and admins a starting point to build an agent for employee support. The agent leverages the best of the Copilot ecosystem, including the Microsoft Graph, plus capabilities designed specifically for employee services. And that's all to give employees that streamlined, centralized experience to be able to get those personalized, contextual answers and to be able to take actions without having to navigate away to multiple tools or even be able to keep track of which tools they might even need. So we'll dig into the details of that, but first let's take a look at the experience. Right, hopefully you're able to see and hear. Right, it does seem like some folks had trouble accessing the video. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we're sharing this out. So these videos that Swati and I are sharing today, we will make them public on our forthcoming Microsoft adoption page. And so those will be fully accessible. It may not be tomorrow, maybe more like closer to GA at Ignite, but we'll definitely have those. But, I think if Lydia, I'm not sure if it is feasible for us to be able to also send out files, we can talk about that, but I do want to make sure you're able to see that experience. All right, so as a lot of you were able to see, we were sharing that employee view, that the employee view, the employee experience there. And so I wanted to dive deeper into what ESS is, employee self-service agent is. And so, as I was saying, it is fully customizable and extensible in Copilot Studio. So you saw in that video that there were some things that were pre-configured, and there were also some things that were customized based on some Power Platform connectors that we do have, and also public APIs. So it's really, you have that ability to be able to tailor it exactly to fit your organization's needs. Building on Copilot Studio and the Power Platform ecosystem, along with our growing library of sample code, excuse me, gives you that robust yet flexible support needed to extend this agent. But to give you a jump start so you can accelerate time to value, Employee Self-Service Agent does include accelerator packs, which I have likened to starter kits that provide pre-built Power Platform connectors that we've built, Microsoft has built, knowledge sources, as well as starter workflows, including a robust topics library that addresses HR and IT scenarios. So building on the M365 Copilot ecosystem to design this complementary agentic experience specifically for employee service delivery means a trusted, specialized agent. It includes authoritative sources, relevant and personalized responses, and also the ability to customize disclaimers and verbatim responses for topics that might need a different approach than just an agent response, like retrieval of information. So that might be something along the lines of like sensitive issues that you might have seen in the video. And as we talked about streamlining employee experiences in a world of many tools, the agent here provides that centralized experience, one place for employees to turn to for their HR and IT tasks. So, being able to connect to the graph as well as your systems of record to be able to really get that personalized content. Also, providing inline action taking with your existing system. So because we have connections to your existing systems of record, you're able to, in employee self-service agent, be able to not only retrieve information, but also take action. So in that video you saw, you're able to replace a laptop, submit that order and go back and check the status of that. We also provide that contextualized handoff in line to other agents, such as the ServiceNow Now Assist agent, as an example. Excuse me. And so really just a quick hit on, the benefits of the extensibility and being optimized for employee services, as well as that centralized experience. Like admins and makers are able to see a faster time to value. They're not building an agent from scratch. That means you can accelerate adoption of the apps and systems in your organization. And it's really the ability to be able to tailor exactly to what your org needs. Because it's designed for employee services, you're able to get that fast, accurate knowledge retrieval and task completion. It's really able to reduce inquiries and deflect tickets for service teams. And of course, it's personalized and contextual, but it's also secure by design, being part of the M365 ecosystem. And lastly, for the end user, having that centralized experience really just streamlines employee support, again, reducing the support tickets and just being more efficient and cost savings. All right. Now, I think what most of you might be more interested in is really like how this employee self-service is designed for makers and what that maker journey looks like.
Awesome. Thank you, Jolene. Yeah, so let's kick off. We're going to now talk about, for the next few minutes, we will mostly focus on like the maker experience. And just for quick context, if you're not familiar, maker is a role in Copilot Studio. And what that does is it allows you to go ahead and configure the things in Copilot Studio 8. And in this case, like Jolene mentioned, ESS agent is a custom agent in Copilot Studio. So your makers can go in, they can configure, they can deploy and enable it in your organizations. So moving ahead, what I'm gonna talk through now is there are two paths to ESS agent. One, there are a lot of things which are available out of the box. So say, when you are enabling ESS agent, out of the box in the package, you do get a lot of jumpstart kits, as Jolene likes to call it. But at the same time, there's a lot of extensibility options that exist in ESS agent. So let's first look through end-to-end what the maker journey looks like. What are the different options available? And then we will look into one, what is available out of the box, and secondly, how you can further extend it. So here, what you're looking at is like there are multiple things that an agent needs for an agent to be able to anchor the responses. So for example, in the video that you just saw, there were responses which were in the box official sources. It was labeled as based on official sources. How that was coming to life was there were knowledge sources that were added in the ESS agent. And when I say knowledge sources, so think of it like, for example, if you're bringing in your HR documentation and the policy as the knowledge source, that is something that you will configure in ESS agent. So on the get-go with ESS agent, we have built support for SharePoint and ServiceNow Graph Connector as the knowledge sources. And when I say we have built support for that, what that means is like if your policies live in SharePoint, if your policies live in ServiceNow Graph Connector, or ServiceNow as a system, we actually have built a Graph Connector on top of that. Both of them, the data will be indexed into the graph. And what that would mean is we will be able to give you back semantic results. We'll be able to give you back the content, which is very personalized to who the user is in that context. And I'll talk about like how we are enabling that in a bit. But if you have these two systems, you can really get started with ESS as soon as you get access to it and make sure that you can bring in those knowledge sources so that when you enable those scenarios, On the other recipient end of your employees, they will see those responses boxed in official sources, and those will be prioritized over the other data that sits in the graph for the similar intents. Another thing that we're building support for out of the box is M365 self-help. So think of it like many a times we are sitting in front of the laptops and you're say having an issues. I'm not able to get my Bluetooth to work, for example, right? So there's so many troubleshooting kits and the articles that are available on M365 self-help. So all that is configured out of the box on the day one with ESS agent. Now let's look at what does it mean for the actions that you just saw. So when I talk about actions, so think of it, you can either read from the systems of record or you can write back into that, right? And that can take different flavors. To start off, we have prioritized HCM systems and the ticketing systems. And again, that has been heavily influenced by all the customer conversations we have been having. So thank you so much for your continued interest in the inputs and helping us build the right backlog. And as of we started it, at GA, we will be having support for Workday. We have support for SuccessFactors. So these both HCM systems are supported. And then ServiceNow as a Power Platform connector is also supported for ticketing. So within ESS agent, you can do your read out from these systems. You can write back into these systems, and then you can also create the tickets. These are, again, there are a lot of pre-configured workflows which we have shipped on top of the ESS agent, on top of these connectors. But in the next slide, I will talk about how you can further extend it further. Maybe that's not all just the scenarios that you need, right? You need more for your organization and how that can happen. In addition to all this goodness around the knowledge sources and the connectors, one thing that we heard loud and clear is customers are really not just all the customers, even at Microsoft, my own leadership across HR and IT, they're super wary about, we don't want to now create hundreds of agents for your employees, right? So, talking about Microsoft, let alone, we have 108 HR tools. Sounds ridiculous, but this is something I've been so surprised talking to various customers like you all. We're not unique. At least there are 70, 80 HR tools that exist across the board. So what that leads to is, imagine now, if we start wrapping these around the agents, employees were initially struggling to find the right app. Now they're struggling to find the right agent. Are we really helping? I don't think so. So this is where the whole value prop of bringing in ESS agent as the entry point comes to life, right? So what we have tried to do is rather than having employees to figure out where to go and do what, as the makers working with their HR implementers, they are in the best capacity to figure out in what scenarios we should be doing the handoff to the right agents, right? And I'll show you those experiences in a bit. You saw a flavor of that on the employee and in the video that Julene just played. But to start off with, how you can do the handoffs in our configuration of ESS agent. And the last bit, this is the most exciting part, is ESS is not a plug-and-play solution. It's not just what is available out of the box. It is meant to scale as your organizations needs more scenarios. And in a bit, I will talk about what are the extensibility options exist. But if you have a different system of record, or if you want to enable more workflows and the scenarios beyond what we are supporting in, say, Workday, SuccessFactors, you can totally do that. And we are giving you all the code samples to do that as well. So let's jump into that a bit. What that would mean is, imagine, and this is where I've been so kind of, impressed with how Microsoft internal team, as we have been on the journey of enabling ESS at Microsoft, we have been able to continue to expand and extend it. So to think of it, by default, I'm just making up examples here. Say for the Workday, we had support for how do I get my employee ID, my work anniversary, and whatnot. But that is not enough for you. Say you want to support the time off and the leave balance scenarios. You can totally do that because all those integrations are available through connectors, but those are not just in the package. And again, this is endless, what all scenarios in that we can enable out of the box. So this is where we want to really leverage the power of Copilot Studio, where you can go in, extend, you have access to the APIs through the Code Studio samples, which are up on the slide. There is a GitHub repo that we're managing, and it is an ongoing samples of the code that we're making available for you all to snap into and enable those scenarios in your tenant. Another thing, the next link that you're seeing up here, that is about if you need more connectors, right? So right now, I think I lost the control. Are you guys seeing the slide?
Yes.
You are?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Maybe do you want to share it again, Jolene, so that I'll take the
Sure.
control
I
back
can
after
take
that?
control. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me
please do.
try to take control. And
Thank
then,
you.
all right, grab it back.
I still don't see it, which is very interesting.
It looks like you took, well, someone else did just take control. So it should be you, unless
Okay.
someone else grabbed it.
Never mind. So maybe Jolene, you keep the control, and we will play around with that, and I'll load open copy on my end. So sorry about that, folks, but that's how the technical life demos go. So all part of it. So essentially, what is happening here is we have, and the second link, what you're seeing here is basically we have the connectors. So what those connectors essentially mean is, like I said earlier, we have support for Workday, we have support for SuccessFactors, we have support for ServiceNow. But what if you need something else? So again, this is where the power of Copilot Studio comes into play. If those connectors exist in Copilot Studio, you can totally bring them in. And in a bit, I will talk about how the MCPs and all coming to life as well. So net, what that means is with ESRs, you are starting off with we are giving you all the building blocks, but you can extend it for the scenarios that you need, depending upon whatever workflows that you have enabled in your organization. All right, without any further ado, let us play a video where you will see what that maker experience really looks like. And then we can double click into the individual aspects of this. So Jolene, if you could play the video, that would be awesome.
I'll do that, yes.
Thank you. Again, so I'll take the control back. All right, so you saw a few things going, and I'll try to answer a few of the questions I was seeing in the chat thread as we were going as well. So if you have your policies that sits in ServiceNow, we as part of the solution, we have also built a graph connector as well. And what that would mean is your data from ServiceNow will now be ingested through graph connector into our 3S, and then we'll be able to give you the semantic search on top of that. But again, this is where the plumbing of graph connector needs to happen. But again, you go into the knowledge sources, you go into the Copilot Studio knowledge part, and then you can add the ServiceNow. Likewise, if your knowledge sits in SharePoint, that is also, it follows the same pattern. And again, this is where we are having the topics, we have the right configurations where you can provide your user context, right? So this is one thing I'd really want to kind of double click a little bit into. We all have built our policies and content over time, right? Over years, we have written policy documents. Not all the content is written in the right manner. So one thing I'll highly emphasize is start doing with your right stakeholders, and we'll talk about the different stakeholders in a bit, making sure the content is in a right way, right? It is very important that even an agent can only parse the data that is indexed in the right manner, right? So I'll tell you one simple example from our journey. If your data is all the data is global, right? So for example, if there's an HR policy, which is all of our US employees or worldwide, the country, the city does not matter, great, you pull it in. But now if you require the data from the country and all that stuff, you need to make sure that we are able to filter on top of that. And the way you will be able to filter on top of that is you need to help the agent understand that I want the data to be filtered on country, or I want the data to be filtered on by city, and what those attributes are. So all those configurations, so that we can give back the personalized responses to your employees, it is important that you do configure that user context. And guys, we have written tons of technical documentation on get started guides, how you can do that really quickly. But again, it is a function of every tenant is unique. You might have 3 different attributes that define who the user is, against which you want to personalize the content, whereas some other tenant might have a different needs. So in your instance of ESS agent, when you get access to it, you will see some out of the box variables that are used to filter the user context. While if you want to expand it, extend it, whatever, that is all supported. Next comes the M365 self-help, right? So this is where if there are troubleshooting and the diagnostics. So this is purely driven from the troubleshooting modules that we have from the self-help itself. And that is, again, available as part of knowledge into the ESS agent. Moving on, I'm not going to drain the full slide in the interest of time here. These are all the different scenarios that are available to the diagnostics and the troubleshooters because of the integration of M365 self-help. But there is a lot of rich scenarios, and it just makes it so much easier, right? So that you don't have to think about where I go if I'm having some technicality challenges, and you just go to one agent and then you can just pop this data in. Now let's just zoom in a little bit on the Workday configuration, because there have been a few questions around that. So taking a step back, we talked about there is Workday connector, that there is a pre-configured workflow. And when I say pre-configured workflow, right now it does support the reading of certain attributes from the workflow because regarding your employment data, it also supports the writing back into that. But again, if you need more scenarios, for example, we talked about that requesting the time off or the service anniversaries. At the bottom of the slide, you will see a code, the Copilot Studio sample codes. So this is a GitHub library where we'll continue to add more and more snippets for you all to kind of just literally use those, build that in your ESS agent instance, and then you can enable that. So there is some work needed for you to kind of, make this your own, like, the workflows could be different. So for example, I'll give one classic example. For us at Microsoft, in US, if I have to update my address, I can just go in and update my address. Whereas in many geos, if somebody has to update their address, you have to bring in your proof of address, you upload that, and after that, the workflow triggers, right? So I'm sure you will have tons of those complexities as well. So all those needs to be baked in to the ESS agent. There's some we have started off with generic enough that we can really kind of, make sure that we can roll it out as a product here. But if you have more customizations, that is totally possible in Copilot Studio. Moving on, likewise, just like Workday is an HCM solution, we have the SuccessFactors. At Microsoft, we use SuccessFactors. Many companies do use Workday, but again, the net, the data is around the same around the employment data. So this is where all the read and the write scenarios, employee manager scenarios, they're available out of the box. And the same mantra applies. You can go ahead, you can write more code snippets. You will have the GitHub library on the ongoing basis. We'll continue to extend it. We are starting off with Workday, but this is where you can add more scenarios that you need for your organization. And likewise, the next step is the ServiceNow. So ServiceNow, we are using it primarily for the ticketing scenarios here. And just want to double click because this is one question we often get is like, ServiceNow we are supporting as a knowledge source, and that is through Graph Connector for the semantic indexing. The ServiceNow I'm referring to right now is the Power Platform connector. So more about like read and write, instant read and write through the APIs that are available through ServiceNow. So that's what is available in this connector and this workflow scenarios. And another thing that is available is like live agent handoff. And man, this is so helpful. You try to troubleshoot an ESS, but then that is not enough for you, right? You really need some help. You want to talk to the live agent handoff, and this is where we can really kind of hand you off into the live agent, summarize the whole context of your conversation so that you don't have to repeat that interaction again with the ServiceNow live agent. So these are like, I would say, again, small building blocks that are in the hope that it can really help you jumpstart on your streamlining the employee self-service experiences in your organizations. And there's the last thing, we double clicked into this earlier as well, but what you're seeing here are some examples again, for the triggers that we have built support for out of the box in our solution. When I say out of the box, so if you go to the ESS agent today, you will see a handoff topic. And within that, we have defined some triggers. For example, if an employee is coming in asking about the leave balances, say in your organization, you're using Workday agent, it will tell the employee to go to the Workday agent for these types of intents. Likewise, for certain intents, we have identified when do we hand off to the Now Assist agent. But this is not the only thing. For example, if you have written complex business logic to enable the Workday agent for different scenarios than what we have supported, you can totally do that. So think of it as like you have all the options. If there are certain workflows that you want to build natively into the ESS agent because you have the Power Platform connector around that, and that's where you build the workflows, that's an option. But if you have invested in a Workday agent, Now Assist agent, you have been doing some work in configuring there, you can totally bring that as in handoff. The whole theme here is we don't want jarring experience for our employees, right? At the end of the day, we want them to go to one place. Don't worry about the boundaries of the apps, systems of records, and the agents, and you can ask those questions right there. And that's where we, truly kind of, harnessing the power of employee experience that comes into play. Another thing I would like to add here is it's not just limited to Workday and the ServiceNow agent, right? So we all are living in this modern era of agents. And if I have to talk about the bigger picture, you will continue to leverage, you will continue to build your own first party line of business agents, right? So for example, the other day I was talking to a customer and they have built an agent around onboarding the employees. Awesome. You don't have to do that again in ESS agent. But what you can tell is like, hey, if anybody in the company is asking about like, what are the next onboarding steps? You create the topic, you configure the triggers, and then you can hand off into the onboarding agent as well. So the point I'm trying to land here is ESS is really built to scale with your setup. Now, if you're using MCP servers, we talked about the handoffs, all that is possible. The next innovation that is coming next is we are really trying to make sure that you as an employer can bring in those different experiences in single pane. And how that can happen is like, for example, right now internally at Microsoft, what we have done is we have a single agent in Copilot Studio, and our team has went ahead and added support for HR scenarios, support for IT scenarios, support for facilities. So I cannot show that right now in the interest of time, but right now if I go to my instance of ESS, I can ask it the questions if there's a meditation room in my building, right? Or how do I book food, or something in the dining area? How do I reserve the food orders there? All that is possible. And again, for that, they didn't have to spin up a new agent. They were able to add all that goodness as part of the single agent. But say for your organization, you have different needs. You want separate agent for HR, you want separate agent for IT, you want separate agent for expenses and whatnot. Absolutely, you can create those instances of the agents. And what we are bringing in with multi-vertical orchestration is there is one core orchestration at the ESS level, which routes your intent into the right connected agents. And then at the end of the day, while there are different stakeholders managing those different agents in Copilot Studio, from the employee perspective, it's a single entry point they go to. And again, with the orchestration, we can route the intents to the right connected agents. It's not available yet. We are working on a preview towards the end of November for this, but inline agent handoffs and the MCP supports, you can go try it out today. All right. Jolene, I would love to hand off to you to talk about some key scenarios in this space.
First of all, I was muted. But second, I was trying to say that I am not going to take too much time in the interest of time here. But let's take a quick look at some of the common HR scenarios here. And then the next slide will cover some of the IT scenarios. I mean, Swati gave some really great examples already, so I won't really drain this. But, looking at the different types of HR scenarios, like, trying to understand, leave policy, or what are the upcoming service anniversaries for my team members as a manager? Do I have any training due? We all have to go through, required security training or compliance training, or maybe it's just our company. Or from a task completion standpoint, how can I take action to submit a PTO request, or update my home address, or as you saw in the example in the demo, help me transfer my direct report from my team to another team. And all of this is, of course, through the connectors, Power Platform connectors that Microsoft has built. So looking at some of these IT examples, Swati gave some great examples already, and we saw it as well, but really looking at support for things such as device compliance, or of course, managing your tickets, support tickets, and providing support for our M365 products and services, such as that Bluetooth example that Swati raised. Or I actually need, I can't solve this problem here. I need a live agent to call me, and so of course that's through ServiceNow. So yeah, I mean, those were just a few examples. Because I do want to hand it back to Swati so that she can share more about our employee services journey over this year.
Awesome. So this is where I really want to kind of bring to life like how we as Microsoft has evolved in this arena as well. So I'll start off with HR specifically, and I'll weave in how we have done that. I talked briefly about like how we have weaved in some facilities related scenarios, but think of it, back in 2010, we all were living in that era where we would have shared services, we will deploy individual distributed HR support people, and who will be tackling the queries. Not scalable, right? So that's when Microsoft went ahead. We started building HR Web. So think of HR Web as it's a SharePoint site where all of our policy documents live and breathe. And on an average, that used to receive 8 million average hits. And what that would mean is like still as an employee, while it was great, there was one place where all the documents were centralized. But as an employee, it was still like I have to parse through 5 different pages until I find my answer, right? And in return, because it was cumbersome, we were seeing 1 million or roughly around that number of tickets every year. Very expensive, very time consuming. And what you're looking at in the hindsight is, as an employee, I need some information. I create a ticket. I wait for at least 24 to 48 hours before that gets resolved. Not a great experience, time wasted, not efficient. You don't get the things done that are top of mind, right? So that's when we were like, you know what, this is not scalable. Let's build a chatbot. And I'm sure many of you have been on that journey with us through as well, like Ask HR, if that's buzzes something. So we provided actually Ask HR as a custom implementation, but many customers did build their own chatbots as well. What that did, it was great. We crafted some manual responses. We cherry picked some key scenarios where we want to make sure we can give those pre-crafted intents and the responses, but that's not scalable, right? It can only answer those 2000 questions that we have told it to, and those responses are going to be same if I'm asking that versus an employee in UK is asking that versus an employee in India is asking that. Not a personalized experience, and again, limited to the Q&As that I have defined there. So that's when Copilot and the AI arena came to life. It was so exciting that now we can point ESS agent to HR web. It understands the intent. It can personalize we talked about the user context setup briefly, but it understands who am I and make sure that I'm getting back the responses which are very relevant to me instead of like, somebody else in some other geo. So that's where all the goodness has started to come to life internally at Microsoft. The way our setup looks like with ESS agent, and again, this is where I'm focusing very much on our HR setup purely. So this is how we started. At Microsoft, we started specifically implementing ESS for HR. Like I mentioned, SharePoint is our system of record for policies. SuccessFactors is our HCM. We are building integration with benefits. We have the ticketing in D365 and whatnot. So we brought in all those integrations. Worked great. But then it did sound very exciting that we want single entry point even at Microsoft for our employees. So this is when we joined hands with our IT support team. We joined hands with our dining and the services team, the facilities organization I was talking about. And we all started kind of, partying on that code base. It's the same agent. And we have built integration. So now the M365 self-help, for example, what I showed you, our IT help desk scenarios, they all are grounded as knowledge into the same agent. And likewise, for the dining scenarios, for example, my team built integrations with the APIs to bring in that real-time data so that you can see what's the cafe menu today, how do I get to building food, or how do I get to a specific conference room? So all that is really possible. And this is where, ESS is a building block. It's a jump starter kit for you all, but leverage Copilot Studio to maximize what you can get out of it. So, and the limits are really endless. We are continuing to kind of, bake in more and more scenario, and the overall enthusiasm and the energy and the results that we're seeing internally at Microsoft is pretty awesome. So at this point, we have rolled out ESS to 200,000 plus employees across Microsoft. Just a few employees are remaining in the workers' councils space specifically, and we are actively reviewing that to kind of get the deployment rolling there. But within these set of employees, we have, one focus I would love to showcase is like the middle blocks here, right? So that's where the return on investment starts to show up. Like there are 31% less scenarios in which employees wants to go ahead and create the tickets. It's a net cost saving for us, but at the same time, on the other hand, as an employee, it is so much better employee experience. It's more efficient and more productive for us, right? So you saw a glimpse of like how in Copilot Studio, you'll be able to have visibility into the analytics and the telemetry and goodness. We are building something similar on the Copilot dashboard as well, so that you can really see what is the net productivity, what are the net hours employees are going to save, and as a business, what the cost savings you are going to have with employee self-service agent. And this is a good segue to talk about what the licensing model looks like for ESS. I'm going to pass it back to Jolene again. I'm sorry we are playing back and forth, but we really wanted to make sure you hear from the right stakeholders on the best possible content here.
Thank you. Yes, so I think there were some questions about this in the chat, and Debashish, thanks for addressing those. But if you've missed it, ESS agent does not require any additional add-on costs if you already have the M365 Copilot license. So it is that added value to the license you already have. But we realize that there will be situations where not all employees in an organization will have the Copilot license. So alternatively, we do offer employee self-service consumptively, as well as via prepaid credits. So really within, from a consumptive basis, you're able to access it through the credits or through pay as you go. And I know in the past we talked about like messages and, the unit of measure was like, oh, per message. But really, if you look at a message, if you look at it from a Copilot credit standpoint, it probably simplifies it quite a bit. But this is all managed in the Mac. And we do get the question, oh, well, how do we know how many dollars or cents, or how many credits? So when we look at it as a credit, a query can really range from approximately 1 to 16 credits, really, depending on the scenario. It depends on, what you have set up, what your environment looks like, what connectors are configured. And we also at GA will be able to share more around how you can estimate those costs. So please do stay tuned. We will have an adoption page that does include this information, because I know it's not as clear as say, oh, it's $30 a month per user, right? So it's definitely a little bit different that we're prepared for to help you address. Swati, back to you to wrap it up.
Thank you. So now we kind of walk through all the goodness that's there in ESS Agent. But between now and when you get access, which is like literally a matter of like a couple of weeks, few weeks, that's it. We are starting to roll out GA gradually within November in itself. So what you can do now. So this is where I just want to make sure we do share our journey with many customers who have been with us in preview of ESS Agent. So if I haven't talked about this earlier, but we have been in preview for ESS Agent for a while now, and we are hitting GA this month like we talked about. But what are the key learnings we have been having as we are going through that journey? So before I dive into like how long it will take for you to get started with ESS, one thing I will highly encourage, and this, trust me, this does take time. I mean, it takes a few days to kind of reorganize your team to make sure you're figuring out the right stakeholders. So what you're seeing up on the screen is what are the different personas and what are the different roles that they play. The titles might be very unique in your organization, totally fine. But the intent is like there are certain key stakeholders who needs to be very much aligned and involved from the day one so that you can really kind of, get the most out of the ESS agent, as well as can roll out a meaningful experience to your employees in a shorter period of time. Let's talk about, I'll go here from left to right really quick. So HR and the IT stakeholders, they are the ones who know what are the business use cases. What are those scenarios where you see most number of tickets in your organization? Because those are the ones where, imagine if you're tackling the ones where you're seeing maximum number of tickets, very high frequency. That's where if you integrate with the ESS agent, you will see an immediate kind of, relief in the employee experience. At the same time, you will see an immediate return on investment here, right? Without taking much time, I just want to kind of quickly tease in one scenario. So very recently, Microsoft announced return to work policies. Awesome. Right? We could have published a SharePoint page, let employees go there. No, but this is where our HR team, because we have been working closely, they were like, you know what? I want to make sure all the employees get the latest and the greatest about that from ESS agent. We integrated that shared policy, added that as a knowledge, defined the starter prompts on the homepage of the ESS so that any employee who goes to ESS, the first thing that they were seeing up there is like, learn more about your employee return to work policies. Learn more about what your benefits will change with this policy, something like that, right? So you can customize it. You can add the knowledge sources that is top of mind. Next thing is like you need the right BDMs involved in here who will be giving the green light as to how quickly you can roll out the ESS agent. And then there are people who are going to actually do the work on the ground, right? They're ones who are going to implement it. They will work on the timelines. They will work on like who are the users they enable it to, right? But one thing that is super critical is like you need the strong advocates in your organizations. We call them champions, but these are the people who understand what value it can bring. They are the ones who will continue to socialize the concept of ESS agent in your organization and make sure when it's available, the end users really adopt it well. So we'll be sharing the slide decks with you all with more details around these. But again, in the interest of time, I want to make sure this forming the right V team is the key to success, and it does take time. So start organizing ASAP. Now here, what you're seeing is like, what are the different timelines it takes for the different phases? Again, the phases in which you enable it could be very different, but this is just the theme I have seen across the multiple preview customers that we have. Most of the customers start the initiate phases. Think of it. You're going in, you're defining what are the scenarios I want to launch ESS with. And then there are people who are working on the deployment. Again, this is where I will highly encourage, don't start with the massive plan. Start small. Think of smaller scenarios, simpler scenarios that you want to enable through an ESS agent to start off with so that you can quickly get into the pilot phase. And pilot phase is where, the subject matter experts are evaluating the responses from the ESS agent. Is it tackling the right things? Is it giving the responses which are personalized? What else I need to configure to make that scenario to work? And once you have built that foundation where you have tested it, you have rolled it out to a smaller number of users, they have blessed their pilot scenarios, then you continue to kind of, bring in more scenarios. Like I walked through at Microsoft, we started off with HR, smaller number of scenarios, we continue to add support for more and more scenarios within HR, but now we also started forking it out for IT and the facilities and whatnot scenarios. So this is so critical. The timelines, again, ESS does require configuration. We talked about it because it has every customer is unique. Your setup is unique. So it's critical that you identify the right stakeholders, not just from the planning perspective, but also the implementation perspective, because they need to have the Power Platform kind of, know-hows to be able to go ahead and configure it. And then you need to identify who are the right people you want to test it out with, if it is kind of, giving the results that you expected it to give. And after that, you start doing the rollouts. And as I've been talking through this, I already hinted on this, but the challenge is to keep in mind forming the right B team. Trust me, this is where, like I said earlier, something that should take 1 week, for a few customers, it took weeks and months actually, because they were not able to get in the lockstep. And when they launched the pilot, that's where another failure happened, because they did not know what are the right scenarios, what does the success look like. So define the success criteria, define those scenarios so that you can quickly scale and roll out ESS in your organization. We are just 2 minutes into the session. Lastly, I will leave you with these links. So this is where the team is working on, like, writing all the technical documentations for you all. We are building a lot of videos that will be published along with our Ignite posts that goes out in like a couple of weeks. And you will have link to all like in-depth technical guidance and the videos on like, how do you set up Workday? How do you set up SuccessFactors and whatnot? So we're trying our best to kind of, give you all the building blocks to get started with ESS agent. But again, this is a journey we all are on together. So it's moving very fast. So we will continue to kind of, build and evolve, keep giving feedback, and we'll continue to evolve our roadmaps and the backlogs here. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and thanks again.